Tell me your secret.
It's a secret that people don't want. Is this a podcast about Runeterra or just random stuff? The answer to that question is yes. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Runeterrable Radio. I am your host, Blevins. With me, as always, is Saucy Mailman. What's up, buddy?
Hey, what's going on, dude?
Oh, not too much. And we are also joined by an ace, a master, a legend in the Legends of Runeterra tournament scene. And streaming scene, for that matter. We've got FreshLobster in the house. What's up, man?
Hey, man, I'm doing fine. Hope y'all are having a good day.
We're trying to.
Yeah, for anyone, and this is a fun fact for anyone that's with us live, you get to hear this live. Lobster himself, he is the actual, in the name Legends of Runeterra, he is the legend.
Yeah, he is one of the legends of Runeterra.
They named the game after him.
Today I learned.
I'm just coming out with good facts today, all over the place, everywhere.
But we welcome everyone from Lobster's chat and from around the world to the show today. We're going to be talking about some Legends of Runeterra, tournament scene. We're going to be talking about Lobster and his background for any of you who don't know who he is. And we're just going to keep it chill. We're going to have a good time. And we're going to be talking about some stuff. But before we get into that, I just wanted to let everyone know that you can join the community. You can join the Legends or the Runeterrable Radio community by going to discord.me/Runeterrable Radio. It's a great place to be. We've got a really awesome community there. Many of you who are listening right now in podcast land are already there, but we'd love to see more of you. It's a great place to just talk about LOR. Jump in and get some deck tips and whatnot, but just overall, really great place to be. But enough of that lame self promotion. People are gonna be saying cringe in chat, I guarantee it. But Lobster, we'll start with you, buddy. Tell us a little bit about your gaming background.
All right,
Wait, Lobster, you're not supposed to put cringe in the chat.
We're
getting scammed.
God. Lobster, tell us about yourself. Who are you for those who don't know?
All right, so I started with gaming and games in general at a pretty young age, probably at like 5-6 years of age. Yu-Gi-Oh! Just came out, all the Pokemon stuff, Game Boys, the first generation, Game Boy Colors, all that stuff. Been there, done that. So I've always kind of played card games on the side. Paper card games back in the days, like Duel Master, Yu-Gi-Oh! You guys probably know
Duel
all that
Master.
stuff, right?
You played Duel Masters? Did you play Kaijudo?
Duel Master.
Did you play Kaijudo?
Duel Master was gangster. I loved it. So once I got into my teens, though, I kind of moved over to poker just because it had more incentive for me to play. It was more competitive. You could actually win money with it and so on. So I studied that a lot. Once I turned 18, I went to some casinos, had some success. Like, I always preferred live over online poker. And my main general gaming background is poker. Did play some Hearthstone on the side, and I kind of got back into the competitive scene with Artifact, which sadly was a bit of a fluke. And then when the Corona lockdown hit and I couldn't go to casinos anymore, I was stuck in quarantine, and I just grinded Runeterra 24/7 for a few weeks. And yeah, it turned out I'm kind of okay at the game. Won a tournament or two. And
I think 5 is it 5 tournaments or something like that?
By now it might be. I don't have all the trophies stacked on my shelf here.
Don't lie. Now, we all know in the room over, you literally have them all. And you've printed out like
3D
photos of
them.
yourself holding them.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got them all.
trophies. It would just be
Yeah.
like a piece of paper I kind of like edited and
Yeah.
printed myself.
Made it with a crayon, like wrote it out. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or like Photoshop a championship cup like super poorly into an image of myself. That would be awesome. Yeah, no, that's how I got into Runeterra. And once I got back to Germany, my internet connection here usually is good enough to stream, so I tried it out, gave it a shot, and I love it. It's awesome. And that's what I've been doing for like the last 1 or 2 months. So officially I'm still a student. I'm on kind of a break though, because the semester ended abruptly due to the corona situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's I mean, that's awesome. I mean, so my background from, you know, where I found you obviously was just from casting tournaments, and you know, you get to, when you start seeing the same names popping up at the in the top 8s and top 4s and winning tournaments, it, you know, you go, hey, maybe this guy's actually pretty good.
But I mean, there have been a couple of people like that, right? I think Sudrakon also kind of just reappeared top 8 all the time. Like some people kind of got into streaming because they performed well in tournaments, and people encouraged them to start, which is awesome. It's really good for the like community and competitive scene.
Yeah, it's really interesting, the LOR scene, because I'm also involved at least slightly in the TFT scene, and I think that scene feels very different. Like TFT feels like people migrated over from League of Legends and from like the streamer community. So like, you know, Skara brings in thousands of people that, you know, play and watch TFT, whereas LOR, you know, coming from a Magic the Gathering background, it's like, oh, it's we're getting the sweaty tryhards that want to play in these tournaments and actually grind and win, and actually just want to play and be the best at the game. So it's like, not to take anything away from either community, I just think it's very different in a way that I didn't think it was going to be. I thought it was just going to be like all of the TFT people and LOR people were going to be the same, because it's like, oh, Riot strategy game, but it's actually not. It's very much like different like people and a different like feel to the community, which is really cool.
Yeah, I totally agree. At first I was a bit afraid of all the League of Legends teenagers kind of coming over, giving it a shot. Like I was afraid of some incredible toxicity, but somehow it rather attracted the spikes, you'd call them, right?
Yeah.
Like these really competitive, sometimes semi-professional card game or strategy game players in general. And I'm really appreciating it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something that, you know, because it's a weird like intersection between Riot games with League of Legends and everything, and other like competitive card games. So like Blevins and I, we were joking when we first started the podcast, like we don't really know what the community is going to be like, but it's been super awesome, and so many like people with good ideas and people with like professional, you know, mindsets, and it's been really like being able to talk with everyone on the podcast has been amazing, like getting good insight and good discussions, and it's not just like, well, I'm just a I hate everyone, and it's like, all right. It's been really cool. It's been great.
And it can happen though, like some elitists you'll find in every scene, in every game. But yeah, here it seems like everyone's kind of very supportive, trying to help each other out, and like mainly trying to make the community grow. And that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, that's our biggest, that's our, you know, core not problem. Our core mission is to, you know, grow the community, which is awesome. So I find it really interesting that you actually come from poker competitively more so than like Hearthstone or Magic, which is very interesting. I've played poker, I wouldn't say competitively, because you can't play online poker for money in the US. Omega lol. But I would say I'm better than a random person playing poker, but not better than someone who studied and played for a long time. But just even putting some amount of time into like poker and poker theory and like the mindset going into poker, you sort of deaden yourself to RNG and like getting like the bad rolls or the bad flips. How has that sort of mindset affected you and impacted your play in Legends of Runeterra?
Yeah, that's actually a really cool question. I feel like it's kind of distinct than coming from a pure trading card game background.
Mm-hmm.
You basically you have less fundamentals of like card games in general. Before I started playing like Artifact and Hearthstone, I didn't even really know what tempo and so on would be, like mana efficiency, all that kind of stuff, initiative. But you are basically schooled in or educated in very concise, rational decision making, right? In probabilities and stats and crunching numbers, in game theory, like kind of dissecting the game down to its roots. And I feel like a lot of people who come over from other collective card games never really put in the effort to do that. And there's actually some valuable stuff to be learned there. I feel like some stuff that would surprise people. Like if you actually look at the numbers, some plays we make, which seem obvious on first sight, are actually bad. Like they're not the optimal plays. And therefore, I do feel like I often, when I discuss with other people, when we practice or scrim or something, I often feel like I see the game from a very different angle, and I'm not yet sure if that's a good or a bad thing, or if you can even say it. It's just kind of a different approach to the game in general, I guess.
Yeah, well, one thing that, I mean, this is unofficial from myself and Casa, just having casted the games, but we call it the Lobster, the pass, where you love taking the pass. Like, hey, you've developed maybe something, you've developed something small. Your opponent passes back to you and you haven't attacked, and you're like, okay, I'll just eat your mana. That's like, to me, that was just watching you do that over the weeks was like a huge like mind-blowing experience of like, oh, this is actually the next level. Because like, Saucy and I came from Magic the Gathering, so like there's a base understanding of the things that you mentioned: tempo, card advantage, mana efficiency, all that stuff. And I think once you understand like how the stack works in Runeterra, if you're coming from Magic, you're going to be at a way higher level than a lot of other people that are starting the game.
For sure.
But like the passing is something that's completely sort of, or at least it's missed in some ways from playing Magic, because you don't really get that like double pat. It's almost like it's more in Gwent and was kind of in Artifact too, where like the double pass of like, okay, we're just going to both pass and move to the next and like force the next phase to happen. Watching you do that really blew my mind, because I'm like, oh, well, I get this game. It's like Magic with Hearthstone. I've played both. I don't have anything more to learn. And then I'm like, you're on like 7 mana, you play a 1-drop, your opponent passes, and I'm like, okay, he's going to attack here. Like, you can literally watch the videos of me casting. Okay, he's going to attack here and then play this, and then you just pass. And I'm like, now why in the world? And then like after 5 minutes of me and Casa going back and forth and figuring it out, we're like, oh, this actually puts him way further ahead, because he just essentially ate his opponent's turn. I mean, can you talk to me a little bit about that sort of mindset and like where you evaluate that? I mean, you don't have to go into super detail on it, because I'm sure it's very complicated, but that play, I mean, there's a reason we call it the Lobsters, because you take it a lot, and it's very good in a lot of cases.
Wow, I didn't even know it had that title.
I mean, it's literally just us calling it. So, but maybe it'll catch on.
Hopefully. So yeah, it's basically rooted in what you already said. I kind of learned how insanely valuable the initiative system is, and the passing thing in Artifact as well. And from poker, I kind of learned that even a very, very small edge is super important, especially if you play at such a high level. And I think most people don't really realize when they are offered this opportunity when your opponent passes, because usually in card games, you just kind of you always go for mana efficiency. You kind of play your stuff. You kind of do your turn and hope your opponent doesn't interact in a bad way, kind of.
Yeah.
And it's not as focused on, like, I feel like coming from poker, I'm in my opponent's head a lot more. And I'm seeing the plays through his eyes a lot more than most other trading card game players would. And or like rather I value it higher and I put more emphasis on it. So the basic thought process behind it is this, right? You need to know which deck is the slower one. Which one usually achieves their win condition first. And if you are the slower deck, and this is a general rule of thumb, if you're the slower deck and you don't mind your opponent open attacking on the next turn, you're fine with taking an open pass. Because as the slower deck, you often play cards that have higher value when they are reactive, right? And your proactive cards are going to be in the late game. Like, for example, the Karina deck, when you actually try to achieve your win condition with Ledros and then boom, boom, boom. But until getting there, it's always better if your opponent first plays a minion that's a threat and you want as a target for your grasp, for example. Like, your opponent maybe has an Elise on board, but they also have mana to play Callista, right? And if their board is not scary, it's totally fine to open pass and offer that to them. And you can also do it the other way around. Like, if you get to a higher level of play, your opponent will also realize this interaction. Like, okay, my opponent plays a lot of reactive cards. He probably, like, he has enough mana for a Vengeance or a Grasp here, and I don't want to offer him my value unit, right? And that's why they sometimes offer you a pass. And this is the next level, is knowing when like the mana your opponent burns is more valuable than the mana you burn.
Yep.
And that's usually when you're the slower deck. But also sometimes it's just like your opponent straight up burns more mana, and even as the faster deck, that's good for you. It's very hard to like make a general rule out of it, but it takes some practice, and it's definitely an aspect of the game I really enjoy.
Yeah,
I really like doing it.
I think the essence of what you're saying is actually encapsulated by an old school Magic the Gathering article called "Who's the Beatdown." Which,
Okay.
if you get it probably came out when you were 4 or 5 years old, maybe. Actually, maybe not even. It might have been before you were born. I don't know. Me and Saucy are old, but
Ancient.
we're ancient in the card gaming world. Actually, not really. We're like middle. We're like middle of the card gaming world. There's some real boomers there. But in the digital card gaming world, we're boomer. We're super ancient. But I definitely implore you, if you're listening to this, check out, just Google the article "Who's the Beatdown."
Yeah,
it really goes.
It's really good. It's one of those things, especially if you're playing slower decks, knowing like when you're the aggressor, when you're the controllers. I mean, being able to flip that. I think talking about I didn't even know that the term the lobster pass, but I'm going to say it all the time. I love it.
It's because literally I made it up.
It's coin.
It's coin.
This is now a thing. This is now it's Runeterra like vocabulary. I started becoming super cognizant of doing that when I was playing a lot of the deep deck. And it was with Jaw Hunter specifically. Like, a lot of times you don't want to just run out of Jaw Hunters.
Sorry.
And there it is. There it is. You don't want to just play like a no-value Jaw Hunters, right? You're using that as removal in a lot of cases. It's a 1 health creature. You're using it as a removal spell. So like a lot of times, if it's your turn, you just pass and then hope they play something, and then you can throw the Jaw Hunters out to kill them. It's like the same situation.
Yeah, sometimes it's like this weird what's it called? In chess, there's this stalemate.
Yeah.
Sometimes stalemates can exist when both people play like or only have reactive cards in deck and don't really want to put anything out on board. Yeah, this game allows for a ridiculous amount of interesting interactions, and I really enjoy it. I have to say, like, when I first started playing it, until I reached maybe diamond level or something, I thought that, like most of the new players probably do, okay,
Mhm.
this game isn't all that complex, right? There's
Right.
not that many cards yet. Like all the strategies are kind of known, like easy to
Mhm.
learn. But once you get put into a bad spot by one of those lines of playing by the Lobster pass, and you realize
It's a
that there's
thing.
more depth to it, yeah, it humbles
There's
you,
a
I
lot of
guess.
complexity. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's one of those things. Like I think what it does well is like Hearthstone, for instance, was a game that a lot of people got into because
Mhm.
the basics, the fundamentals are super easy to grasp, but then
Mhm.
it's harder to master. And this game takes that way further. Like you
Mhm.
can play the tutorials and have a good time. You know, iron, bronze. Like you can play the game and have a good time, and then like when you make those quote unquote big brain plays, like when you vengeance your own Anivia so you can miscall it and do this
Yep.
crazy shit, like
Mhm.
that's when you start grasping it. And like the feeling of when you learn a complex game like this, for any Magic players, the first times that you realize, you can do these crazy things. The
Mhm.
Runeterra really captures that, and it definitely has that super, super complexity to it that feels really good when you start getting it.
Exactly. And what I love is how interactive it is with your opponent.
Mhm.
There's like basically endless streams of leveling. Like, what does my opponent think? What does my opponent think I
Mhm.
think? What do
Mhm.
I think? Yeah, you could spin
Yeah.
this off forever, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's a skill. It's a skill.
I love something I missed playing Years of Hearthstone is like the bluff attack. Because you can't,
Mhm.
like Hearthstone, there's no interaction, at least directly, right? It's like if you're attacking, right? But in Magic, you can attack. So I'll simplify it. You can attack with a 1/1 and your opponent has a 2/2 to block. And if you have mana open, you're representing, I'm putting it in air quotes for the podcast listeners, you're representing having some sort of pump spell, right? Or like if they
Or like
block
Vile Feast
Feast or
yeah.
something, right? So if your opponent knows that you're representing that, they're probably not going to block, right? Well,
Mm-hmm.
in Hearthstone, you can never have that. And you can also, the thing is you can represent it without actually having it. So you can attack
Mhm.
with that 1/1 into the 2/2, and it's like, well, if they block, I guess they got you. They called your bluff, but you also, like, it's something that a newer player might not even think. It's like, oh, they have a 2/2, I have a 1/1, I can't attack. That's just, this 1/1's never getting any damage in. But if you have that, if you're representing it, whether you have it or not
Yeah.
is irrelevant. Like, and you can get extra damage of the 1/1 that has no business doing it. That's sort of like, again, that's like multiple levels
Yep.
after, and it's really one of the most beautiful parts of the game. And
That's when people when because I talk all the time about how much I love Fizz because he's amazing, right? But like that's one of the reasons you get in so many situations with it. Like playing a lot of Fizz decks, you learn that speed of play is something that actually matters as well. Because if you have nothing but you just windmill, throw out Fizz on an open attack, they always think you have a spell, and you might not. A lot of times your hand is bricked, and you just, you know what? If I just attack right when my turn starts, they know I have a way to protect Fizz, and they let it go through almost every single time.
Yep.
Almost always. It's amazing.
Yeah, getting that free Fizz damage.
Yep.
And I will say, when I was grinding up the ladder this season in like Diamond and even into like into Masters as well, people will not pass. They just won't do it until you get to like high level Masters. Like, they will not take the pass. Like, I've gotten so much extra value out of Ruinations by, like, they could have just attacked and done a very good amount of damage, but they're like, nope, got to get that mana efficiency. I'm playing. Oh, he passed it back to me. He definitely doesn't have a Ruination. I'm gonna play another thing on top of the Cythria, and it's like, it's like you said, Lobster, to tie it all back together. The little bits of advantage accrue over the course of the game, and in one instance it might be huge, but over the course of the game those little bits of advantage become insurmountable, and that's the long game. And I think, to go back to my original point, I think that's where the poker mindset gets you. It's like you are making a series of high EV plays, and whether they pan out in that specific scenario or not is irrelevant, because over the course of time they're gonna pay off in the long run. So
Exactly. yeah, to put it in poker terminology, it's always like you always get a marginal advantage
Yes.
with these passes and so on, which other people don't even see is there, or like beginners might not see is there. Also, one more thing, as we're currently in poker terminology, one of my viewers just had this analogy which I really liked. So you could kind of compare this open pass to a check raise in poker. Instead of just leading out and betting,
Yes.
you can get more value checking, letting your opponents fall into
the trap. Yes.
Exactly. And that's basically, in a lot of situations, you can kind of have mind games like that in Legends of Runeterra as well.
Oh, man. I mean, no, it's called the Lobster Pass. I'm like, oh, man, do we just call it the check raise? No, it's called the Lobster Pass. It's written down. It is decided. But I do love the analogy of the check raise. That's a really good. That's a really good. Okay, so that was your 27 minutes of LOR 404 masterclass. Now we're going to talk about dumb stuff. We're still going to talk about good stuff.
Stupid shit comes out.
Yeah, now all the stupid shit comes out. Actually, this is sort of a transition. But what are some of your favorite decks, Lobster, that you've played, whether in tournament or ladder or just have theory crafted? What have you been liking to play?
Okay, I straight up have to say, I think my favorite decks are Teemo decks. I love the top cap spam. I'm not even gonna lie. I wasted so much time theory crafting. If you can actually bring a Teemo deck to a tournament and it's gonna be at least acceptable, and I just didn't find it. But one of my favorite decks in beta was a Teemo Heimerdinger, almost mono PNZ deck.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was so good. Like, you play Starlit Seers and Elixir of Irons and Freljord, and the rest is just basically Heimerdinger, removal, and Teemo and all the puff cap spam. And
yeah, you get them with burn. It's amazing.
Exactly. Like, you have so many win conditions. You can finish them off with burn. Like, Heimer is a win condition always. Puff caps are a win condition, but also you play a shit ton of spells, right? Starlit Seer can give you like a 12, 11 Thumb Snipe Scavenger, and it's just going to be an elusive and just one-shot your opponent. It was so good. And so I guess the post-launch upgraded version of that might be Teemo Sejuani.
Yeah, Teemo Sej is super fun.
Yeah, it's actually pretty solid as well. Currently, it kind of gets screwed by Yoink.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe if Yoink falls out of the meta, it might actually be a consideration to play a bit more. Apart from
it's super
that,
sweet. Like, the puff caps freezing their whole board is just amazing, because it just happens just like incrementally throughout the game. You don't have to use your own spells, and then you're just like, I guess you can't detect this turn.
Exactly. It's like you already did up all the work. You did all the work on turn 1 to 6, and then the rest is just like popping up by itself. Exactly.
Yeah.
Thinking if I can think of anything else. Like, I always enjoyed different tournament decks, but that always changed from time to time. The last few weeks, Deep was really fun to play. It's one of those decks that is fun to play, but not fun to play against. There's a lot of those in Legends of Runeterra. Azrael Draven used to be the same, just because it had so many legitimate lines of play, so many small interactions. It was so hard to pilot. Always a real challenge, and I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I loved casting the Ezreal Draven mirror, especially when one person was very familiar with it and the other person wasn't, because it was like one person, I'm like, the first time I ever cast it, I had no idea how the mirror match played out. And I watched who was it? Oh, Sunglasses, who's a streamer in the LOR community, was playing it the mirror match, and he knew how to play it, and I'm like, he's not playing anything. He's just keeping all these cards. He's not playing a single thing, and he ended up winning by like a wide margin. It's like, oh, you just kill everything that gets played, and you just want to you just want hand size. So that was really like those types of matchups where, like, that's another thing in LOR is like, it's not just knowing how to play the deck. It's like knowing how to play the deck against the matchup that it's in, because it can vary drastically.
Yeah, as Draven is one of those decks that has flexible win conditions, like multiple win conditions. Yeah, you can overrun your opponent on board. You can level your Ezreal. You can also just melt their face down, right? Because once at a tournament, when your opponent has the same game plan as you of not dropping anything on board, it's about who gets puff caps into your opponent's deck first. And that's a whole nother dimension. It's so fun.
Yeah, it was definitely crazy. So Saucy, do you want to ask the most important question we have here?
Yeah, so very important question. This one's just like, this is the top tier question.
It's true.
I'm curious, what's your favorite Guardian?
I'm just waiting for you to ask me what my favorite color is as well.
Spoiler.
Jeez. All right, can you cross that one off the list, Blev? I'm not even gonna ask it now.
Wow.
So my favorite Guardian right now, I think I have two.
Okay,
that's fine.
So currently with the arcade game board, I think the Rainbow Poro is the nuts. I think it's S tier.
Yep.
It's so like. I also love the Rainbow Poro emote. I know a lot of people think it's garbage and it doesn't do anything. But
wait,
I think
it's garbage?
Yeah.
Really?
Stupid. That is dumb. That's a cold take.
Yeah. The Rainbow Poro is like the hard counter to the sad Poro.
Yeah.
It just blows people off their like mindset and concentration. You guys need to try it. Just someone's sad Poros, you just spam the happy Poro, and they don't know what to do anymore.
Yeah, we've been talking about this a lot recently. There is a deep emote meta going on, and I agree. I think the Rainbow Poro just hard counters sad Poro. Yeah, I stopped running sad Poro because of it. Like it just counters. It gets countered so hard by Rainbow Poro.
Yeah,
that's a hot take though. That's a risky one.
It's risky, but it pays off.
All right. The other Guardian I really like is the little Endure thing. I don't remember the name.
Bailey.
Bailey. Yeah.
Bailey's sick.
Yeah.
And what I like about it is like the coloring sometimes, like the flash and the eyes, is so distracting. It looks like an animation is happening on board or something. And so often it just, when my opponent had it, it just took me out of my concentration. Like, what just happened?
Yeah.
It's actually, I mean, if you have a Guardian who might actually impact the game, just imagine. Pay to win, right? Pay to win.
Wow. Well, you heard it here first, folks. Buy the Bailey emote if you're playing in a tournament, because you will throw Lobster off of his game.
Yeah, if you're playing against Lobster, throw it on a Bailey, and his brain stops working altogether.
I just time out every turn from then on.
So the other important thing that I always want to know, because this is where it gets fun, I want to know your top 3 favorite and your top 3 least favorite cards in the game, other than Teemo. We know he's an auto include in every repertoire.
Let me think about this for a second.
You have exactly 22 seconds to think.
I would need a card list right now. What are some cards I really like?
Do you have any cards that you just really hate to see?
I think a dislike, for sure. 2 of my top 3 would be Heimer and Karma.
Okay.
The reason being, well, I should also say, like, when you ask me about which decks I enjoy, I might be a bit sadistic here, but I kind of like the Bannerman playstyle, especially the Bannerman Mirror. Just because it challenges raw fundamentals in a way which no other matchup really does. Especially the Bannerman Mirror. Like straight up kind of like the chess move, straight board control, just stats and everything. I really enjoy that. So Karma and Heimer for me are 2 champions with mechanics which bring the games to its edges, right? It's they're super volatile mechanics. They can either do nothing all game if you don't have the combo pieces, or those cards by their own over time can just, or even in one turn, can completely blow you out of the game. We've all been there, like the Karma Exodia, just So I'm playing Karma, next turn double get excited, triple mystic
yeah.
shot,
Yep.
spell stacks full, and you're like,
Mhm.
fun and interactive gameplay, right? Let me see. And a third one, which I dislike, is kind of hard.
What about the
The ones I really like.
what do you? I guess this is maybe a possible answer, but also maybe just a follow up topic. What do you think about looting from your opponent's deck? The klepto cards.
Oh yeah. I was one of the few who, for a very long time, said like the mechanics fine. I don't know what all of you are so pissed about until until I was in a series in a tournament which decided who would move on to top cut, and I was playing sea monsters, and I had the game in complete control. I did the mistake of at some point in the game playing a shipwreck hoarder, and my opponent had a one-off pilfered goods in his deck, and he yoinked a plate worm egg and a jettison to go deep the same turn.
Yeah, we caught that on stream, by the way.
Yeah, I remember that.
Like right
You
at
hate
that
to see
moment
it.
too, which was kind of funny.
Yeah.
We kind of cursed it. Like I
Yeah,
think when we
you
jumped
have a
over,
point there.
the pilfered goods was like on the stack, and then we saw what it took, and we're like, oh, or no, we didn't see your opponent's hand. We go, okay, oh, he got a jettison, that's not good, and then placed plate worm eggs, and we're like, I guess he loses here.
Yeah. And it was kind of sick because it was like the game looked unlosable.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I guess we could add pilfered goods to the least liked cards here. Now, cards I like the most, Cloud Drinker. No,
I was gonna say your chat is spamming Cloud Drinker.
yeah, they made me play an OTK Exodia, like a Cloud Drinker plus Dawn and Dusk
Mm-hmm.
plus Puffcap Peddler plus Vault Breaker combo. So you
Yep.
get infinite 0-mana Vault Breakers. And after like 16 minutes, I think my opponent decided to alt F4.
I did that once, and we actually got to let him draw. He drew like because we had 1,200 because I had a Teemo on board, so I got to 600 and some and hit with Teemo, and he drew like 300 and some on his next draw. It was awesome. It was so good.
So silly. Okay, but favorite cards. I think one of my favorite cards, which is not just straight up meta, would be Jinx. I really enjoyed the whole discard aggro playstyle. We could maybe even add Draven to there too, because as Draven was one of my favorite decks, as Jinx, Draven Jinx was also one of my favorite decks. And I think if we go with champions, like one I recently discovered for myself was Ashe. She's super fun to play, super strategic. You always need to plan in advance for this big blowout turn. Yeah, I think I'll go with those.
Yeah,
Ashe, Jinx, Draven.
Those are good ones. Watching you play the Ashe Noxus mirror match was a treat. I think it was a couple of, not last tournament, but 2 ago, was like, oh, this is unwinnable, and it's like, oh, actually, you drew 5 cards off of the the assessor, and then it's like, oh, okay. It came down so much to like, I think opponent like threw away an Ashe early or something, and it's like, actually the game is super close and it's a huge board stall, but it's over because the Ashe, like the third Ashe is gone. So it was really crazy. And that was really we had seen that deck before, but it was really sort of a breakout in terms of it being really widely used, and like seeing the mirror match be like, oh, this game's going to go on forever. It's like, oh no, actually you just win in one turn with Ashe. It was really crazy and really fun to see that sort of deck come out and be really strong. But so speaking of the competitive scene, obviously we've been, you've been a part of a lot of these weekly tournaments, the Duels of Runeterra, the Jam Fests, some of the one-off G'day Maverick events, and some other tournaments that have been going on as well. Moving forward in the long term, what do you want to see out of a competitive scene for LOR?
Well, okay. Let's first of all go with like in-game client side. I would love to see a spectator mode, obviously.
Same.
Yeah, I think we're all on
Same,
the same
right.
page here.
Yeah.
I would love to see an in-game tournament mode, and I would love to have in-game deck tracking that actually accounts for toss and so on. All of that is definitely possible. We saw it on Artifact. Maybe that's the reason why it's not in Runeterra, though.
Right.
But those parts of Artifact just blew my mind about like how competitive friendly a card game can be.
Yep.
So much for that. And also from Riot's side, I would love to actually just see some promotion, some big tournaments, just to see the esports scene flourish. But yeah, from the community side, I can't even really complain a lot. There's a lot of people trying to host interesting tournaments and everything. They're all putting a lot of effort in. They're doing great work. They're providing a lot of opportunities for competitive people to play. You guys shoutcasting as well, so yeah, I can't complain. I'm just hoping it's gonna grow and maybe get the attention it deserves, and that would involve like eventually catching more attention from maybe esports teams and so on. Like bigger organizations. I mean, we already have some EG liquid players and so on, but something in that direction surely would both like bring more viewers to the games, more players, more new players, and would give more opportunities to competitive players.
If you had to pick one esports org that if to offer you a contract right now, who would it be?
Oh, that's a trick question. I don't think I should answer this.
So you heard it here, esports orgs. Send your offers over to FreshLobster. I can personally attest it would be a very good investment if you want some trophies for sure.
Yeah.
Saucy, any other questions that we want to throw to Lobster before we go into the listener questions?
I had an interesting one I was just thinking about in relations to things we want to see to the competitive scene. How would you feel about there being some kind of like I'm just thinking, I'm just gonna spitball and just let my brain wander here, but some kind of like if it was like a tournament circuit or some kind of some even like a DreamHack thing, but like an in-person large tournament circuit, like a grand tournament, some kind of something. How is that something you would ever be interested in, or is that something you want to see happen with Runeterra?
What do you mean by in person though? You mean like live?
Yeah, like you live
LAN
travel to these events, even if
Like
it was
we're
like
in a
Overwatch
convention
League.
hall, or in a convention hall or a venue playing on computers close to each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'd actually love it. I think this game is a lot more dynamic and fun as, for example, a game like Hearthstone. And Hearthstone manages to do it all the time. They get enough viewers in and everything, enough interest.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if the game ever grows large enough that a lot of people actually want to see it, I would totally be down for that. It would just be a bit tough to coordinate it with like European players and North American players and so on. Obviously, the distances are huge.
Well, that's why you're going to be on that org that pays for your plane ticket.
Right, they're going to be flying you around.
Hopefully.
The one of the big reasons I bring this up is just because I'm curious, coming from a poker player where being able to see your opponent can give you a lot of information, because I come from Magic the Gathering and playing in person, like something you lose playing over the internet, like when you play Magic online or anything, is that human interaction. And you can get so much, like a good player can get those extra percentage points reading their opponent. Like I'm just curious how you think that would translate into Runeterra, being able to like physically see your opponent as they're doing things across from you.
You know what? I do agree that it's a very good and very interesting point. I think the effect is kind of limited, though, for example, as opposed to poker, because you need to focus so much on what's going on in the exact game, like plan your turns ahead. And like always keep in mind all the resources, all the values, who's ahead, who can I pass, can I not pass, do I need to develop, what could my opponent have? And you don't really have that much time and focus to actually peek aside your screen and check out your opponent and try to also interpret the body language and so on. That being said, I do think it does add another layer to it.
Yeah.
Like you would surely, especially if people don't have good poker faces or postures, and if you include the amount of time they take and then can take a glance at your opponent, it probably does give you information which you otherwise wouldn't have on the internet. I do agree.
Yeah.
See,
Yeah, there's so many tournament games in Magic that I won just by reading my opponent. Like when they draw and they can't contain that they just drew their board clear.
Yeah.
And you're like, all right, I'm just gonna not commit anything else to the board. Like
Yeah.
there's it's my favorite thing in card games.
Or the old trick of if they look at their graveyard, you just write on your sheet, oh, they have Snapcaster Mage. It's like little things like that. And like it's kind of out of vogue now in MTG because they've kind of changed how competitive. But I used to be in tournaments. I was effing cutthroat for those like pro level events like Grand Prix and stuff, PTQs. It's like that's just how it was back in my day. Now it's like, oh, both players have to make sure that everyone gets positive effects. It's like, yeah, I'm out. I'm not doing that. I'm actively trying to get my opponent to forget their positive effects.
Yeah, exactly.
And like I've on multiple occasions just by like asking questions, like I've gotten opponents to concede when they had lethal on board because they didn't think that they had lethal on board. And that's now people would call that what is it?
Oh, that's dirty.
Shooting. Yeah. Well, I mean, again, I'm coming from a super cutthroat like now people what do they call it? It's not called trick shotting. It's called
angle shooting.
Angle shooting. And it's kind of a faux pas these days, which is maybe part of the reason why these old guard players like me don't play anymore. Also, I'm trash. No, but it's like, yeah, that was part of the fun for me. But also, I would also anytime if I had a judge call in Magic, if the judge didn't rule in my favor, I would snap appeal, even if I knew that it wasn't supposed to be my favor.
Legit.
Yeah. I think that's probably bannable, but I don't care. Screw you, Wizards. I hate you.
Yeah.
Not really. I don't hate Wizards. I just hate I hate Magic the Gathering judges in general.
You know what I don't hate? Listener questions.
Me either. I love listener questions. See, we had a little bit of a transition there. We've got a few listener questions here, and we got a little bit of time. So if you guys have questions in chat, get them in. Okay, so let's start off here. We've got Rox Rex 218 who asked the question on Discord. Again, discord.me/Runeterrable Radio. And we can answer some questions here. So going into the ranked reset soon in patch 1.3, how are you approaching ladder? Do you have any advice for those of us who are feeling, quote, the grind?
Well, that's a pretty general question. The most standard, but yet one of the best advice, like tips you could give anyone to play ladder is try to not get frustrated with your deck after you lose 2 or 3 times. And try to not interpret losing streaks as the deck being bad. You might just have had bad luck for a while. But instead, try to master one deck. It's like no one in Runeterra plays anything close to perfect, and the most important thing is making less mistakes than your opponent. And therefore, if you're very familiar with a deck, even if you lose a few in a row, you'll still kind of, on autopilot, you'll still play it well. And eventually that downswing is going to stop, and you will get back to grinding and to ranking up. One thing though is you also need to sometimes be harsh. There's the other extreme of players who always stick with their one deck even though it's garbage in the current meta. And then it's just sometimes it's also time to let go.
Yeah. That ties in when we can ask this question because B2 asked, how much do you play a deck before deciding whether you should keep climbing with it or not?
Okay. So if the deck is already kind of meta proven, if you have, I don't know, net decked it or like seen a lot of other like people play it, have success with it, you're probably fine just playing a few games, see if you like it, you feel comfortable with it. If it's your own brew, this is very hard to interpret.
Yeah.
For most people, I would recommend just kind of sticking with what's more or less meta or up and coming and make it your own. Like you can always tech a bit differently and kind of give the deck your own character. But with completely new brews, you need kind of a sample size of 50 or 100 games, or maybe even more, before you can consistently say, okay, this was not just like a hot run or like a streak of bad luck, but this deck actually has this and that win rate. So yeah, the best answer I can give is it depends. Yeah, it depends on the overall information that is available for this deck.
Yeah, definitely a good piece of advice there. Kind of a related question here. This is from RobBot. They asked, how often do you consider going off meta as opposed to sticking with decks with proven success that need a little tweaking? It's going to be for both, I guess, ladder and tournament as well, because it also applies there.
That is actually a very good question, and it's a concept that's a bit hard to explain. So basically it depends on what your goal is. If you are just trying to win more than 50% to get to Masters, you're probably best off sticking with a meta deck and trying to master it. And a meta deck, has a higher win rate of 50%. But if you're actually shooting for rank 1 in ladder, you need way more than a 50% win rate, right? So all those meta decks won't cut it, because as soon as a deck becomes meta or like very strong, everyone's aware of it. Everyone's going to try to figure out how to play against it as well.
Yep.
And the win rate might shoot up within the first couple of days the deck is discovered, and then it will kind of settle down. So if you want to go for either rank 1 or ladder, or for like a very good tournament run, you need to win a lot more than 50%. And that's when you should not just meta slave, like not just net deck something completely, because it will only get you to maybe like 60-65% win chance. But you need to figure something out that's one step ahead of the meta. And that's, usually the best timing for trying some off-meta stuff out is immediately after balance patches. And that's usually when you'll see most movement in top 20, top 50 off ladders, because everyone's kind of trying out new stuff, and some people might be playing decks that are super strong, but no one knows them yet. And they might rock 80-90% win rates up to those dimensions. And that's when you want to go off meta. With tournaments, it's always like, you want to still bring good decks, but they should be like half a step or one step ahead of your opponent's lineups. So basically, you think first about what are all my opponents going to bring, and then you think about what do I bring that is like, which 3 good decks do I bring which do well against all of that stuff.
Yeah, it's the second layer of rock paper scissors, not the actual rock paper scissors that you used to determine.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, so really good question there from RobBot. So we've got Cephalopod, another tournament grinder as well, asked, open deck list and ranked is something that Prismat, another tournament grinder, has been calling for. Is that something that you are in favor of?
If you ask me personally, yes. But I also have to say, it kind of like requires a slightly different skill set. So if you have closed deck lists, part of the skill of playing ladder is predicting your opponent's decks without exactly seeing their cards. Like, which tech choices should I play around? Which one shouldn't I? So it's a lot more like playing with probabilities in your head.
Mm-hmm.
Like these cards could be in my opponent's decks and these cards couldn't. But me as a tournament player, I'm already used to the open decklist format, and it gives you more of an edge. Like if you know how to play against and around these cards, like if you're familiar with my opponent is that likely to hold this card and all that kind of stuff. Like I personally would prefer open decklist as well, but then again, I don't think it's going to be implemented.
Yeah, from coming from Artifact, yeah, it's like in the drafts and stuff, it was open deck lists, and it's like it is good in the sense if you really want to focus super hard on every single game and maximize your win rate, it's like, okay, I know I don't need to play around. Unyielding Spirit, for instance, would be one that's like, oh, they don't have Unyielding Spirit in their deck. I don't need to play around it. The stuff that we're used to looking at, watching and playing in tournaments. But on ladder, I think it's less of a like, oh, well, obviously it is better and it will help better players play better. It's like no one's arguing that. It's more of like from a philosophical perspective, do you want ladder games to be that like put that much extra pressure onto the ladder games? And I lean towards like no, especially on mobile too. Like thinking about like some people are going to be playing on an iPad or their phone. It's like I really don't want to have to pull up like that those players are a consideration as well, even if they aren't necessarily tournament players. Like I think there should be a little bit of a distinction there. I don't know. That's my personal thought.
I haven't actually heard that take about open like deck lists for ranked. I just selfishly don't want that to happen because one of my favorite things is to put those one or two just random bullshit cards in my deck that like your opponent should never expect.
Yes.
I was playing like Mind Meld in a Fizz deck for a long time, and like I've been playing this Anivia War Mother's Call, but I put the Dreadway in there just to get the Anivia double damage and just random stuff like my opponent can't calculate this. So I don't know. I like those random fun ofs, but I don't know. Like you said, you're used to probabilities, especially when you're highly ranked and you're like, seeing the same decks. You're like, all right, I know this Bannerman list like the back of my hand. I know every card. And then when they just play that one random like what is it, consecrated strikes or whatever, you're like, what? Like it's so like those weird one ofs.
Oh,
they can really throw you off. I
thought you were saying Consecrated Sphinx, and I'm like, oh,
yeah,
Consecrated Sphinx is in LOR.
It's coming next patch. You heard it first.
I love Consecrated Sphinx.
I was just playing Commander the other day. Sorry, guys.
I remember when that card was in Standard. #boomer.
Well, I do have one more thing about this question.
Yeah.
So it would be an option to only implement open decklist for Masters, or if it comes out eventually, Grandmasters. And the problem with it is it's probably not worth coding and implementing such a feature just for the couple of hundred players that actually care about it. I think there are a lot of other features that would be prioritized.
Yeah, I'm philosophically and from a like even just a like design perspective, I'm very much in the school of thought of keep it simple. Keep it simple, stupid. Like you don't like would open deck lists provide a useful functionality for players? I don't think anyone would argue against that. That is a true statement, but I think it puts in a lot of additional pressure on the games, and also like it complicates it. Like, yes, we could have, you could have a bunch of additional stats that are in the client, right? And like Riot has access to them, right? And you could just have all these spreadsheets and like what are your probabilities of drawing each card, and you could have all this clutter and all this additional data, and no one would argue that data is bad to have from a competitive standpoint, but you also need to think of UI, UX, and like player experience in general for more than just like the top 0.01%. So
exactly,
I agree with you there. I think it's a feature that would be, I think just keep it in tournaments. I think that's a fine line in the sand to draw. Is like let's keep it in let's just keep it in tournaments. But that's my personal thought. Okay, so Raven C777 asks, I'm an aggro player and suck at control, and I play mid-range mediocrely. Any advice for adjusting to different archetypes?
Okay, that's also a pretty good question. The main thing you need to shift is like your attention shouldn't mainly rely on your opponent's Nexus health as the most important resource in the game, and like how do I get it to 0 as quickly as possible? How do I use all my cards to hurt my opponent's Nexus? But rather, you focus a lot more on value, like playing your cards in a valuable way. On and like your opponent's Nexus health becomes rather unimportant. Your own Nexus health becomes more important if you play against slower decks. But it's mainly about also the more controlled oriented your deck is, the more important it is that you know the whole meta and know all the
Right.
common archetypes and what your opponent is most likely to play. And then you always need to consider like, okay, this card is going to be the best answer I have for this specific card of opponent. And that would, for example, mean not wasting your Vile Feast on an Omen Hawk or a Verosan Sentry when your opponent also plays Trifarian Glory Seekers. Yeah, it's kind of a different mindset and attitude to the game. You want to kind of control board and health in a way that your opponent is slightly ahead of you, but it doesn't get out of control. And you always look for those opportunities to swing it.
Yeah.
I know that's all very abstract advice. It's kind of hard without specific in-game examples, but it
I think
just
like,
takes a while to get used to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like whenever someone's asking me how to get better at playing X archetype, usually it's control or mid range. Like my biggest advice is always understanding what your win condition for that specific game is and trying to achieve that. That's one of those big things when we were talking about earlier about that article, like understanding when you're the beatdown. Because sometimes like it's all matchup dependent, but I think the biggest thing is just knowing what your goal is and how you're going to win that game, because like against some decks you don't need to win, you just need to not lose, where there's in other matchups you actually need to win before they can win, especially if you're playing against combo, like if you're against Karma Ezreal, you actually need to be the aggressor as a control deck because they will eventually just win and combo off. So having a good understanding of the meta, like Lobster said, is honestly going to be one of the best friends that you have. But also understanding how you're planning to win in that specific matchup will help you a lot.
Yeah, I totally agree. If you mainly play aggro, you always enforce your game plan first, right? You always just try to rush down your opponent, and you only lose to your opponent outvaluing you anyway. So it's pretty one-dimensional. But if you play control, your opponent can have a lot of different game plans. Like the Karina deck has a different game plan than a combo Ezreal deck,
Right.
which has a different gameplay than a deep deck, or game plan rather than a deep deck, for example. And you always kind of need to balance hindering your opponent's game plan so they don't achieve it before you achieve your own game plan. Or like your win condition, rather, like you said.
Yeah. I think one of the most interesting like angles or lenses to look at that in is the aggro mirrors, because depending on your draw and your opponent's draw, you're going to be placed into whether you're the controller or the aggressor, and that might change depending on certain like static static shock, for instance. It's like, okay, well, am I going to kill 2 of their guys? Am I going to put a damage on one of their guys, or am I going to go 1 to face 1 and kill one of their guys? Like that, those decisions like put you into like, okay, I'm using my get excited to kill their Crimson Disciple
Draven.
Here. Yeah, or their Draven, yeah. Like, okay. But in some instances, depending on the board state and what their life total is, what your life total is, etc., like that, you need to save that get excited to go to their Nexus. So that it gets super complicated very quickly, even in aggro matches, which people you know, spam forehead SM Orc. I'm telling you.
5 head, just hit face.
Yeah, just hit face, forehead. Easy. Okay. We are coming up on close to time here. Saucy, are there any additional questions or topics that you want to cover before we go?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think this is a really good show. Super fun.
Yeah.
Wealth of knowledge. And it's great. I love to see, just different perspectives. Like Blevin said, we usually get a lot of, people coming from, Hearthstone, Magic, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, whatever. I love, because poker's one thing that I never really got into, especially just because like Blevin's hinted at earlier, like our shitty gambling laws here in America like just suck. I grew up in Las Vegas, so we had a lot of gambling.
Nice.
And like even like I played Magic instead. So it's just really cool because I'm a super mathematic and like I'm a very analytical player. I have like zero emotional connection to any card. So like we have a lot of people who are like, this card needs banned because it's. I'm like, well, but if you look at the win rate of the card, like it's actually. But I hate playing against it. Like I just don't care. So it's just nice to see that side. I really enjoy it. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, really, really do appreciate it, Lobster. Lobster, let people know where they can find you on the internet and in various places. Sell out, shout out, do it all.
First of all, thanks to you guys for having me. Shout out to both of you. That was really fun. I enjoyed it. I think we covered some super interesting topics. And okay, self-promotion time, I guess. I am on Twitch mainly. I try to stream every day. Usually at least 6 times a week I manage right now. It's FreshLobster CCG. And I've also recently been working a lot on putting stuff up on YouTube. I think my channel by now has a nice spread of guides as well as live coaching sessions, as well as some tournament gameplay, some runs of the recent tournaments. And I have a series called Tournament Classics, which is some like old school cool sets against like from beta, which were some of the coolest sets I've ever played. For example, the set against Mogwai when he brought the anti-Bannerman lineup.
Yes.
I remember stuff like that. Yeah,
I remember that
come
tournament
up in the future. Yeah, that was a good one. Apart from that, Twitter, I also try to be on every now and then. It's FreshLobster C, and I think that's all.
Awesome. Well,
we'll have to do a YouTube collab. I just had this idea where we can talk about Teemo. So you and I, let's do it. Let's do a Teemo video together.
Yeah, and I want the Lobster coaches Blevins to at least mediocrity as well. That's another.
Ooh. I don't know, like. Lobster's a pretty busy guy. I don't know if we can fit that.
Yeah, actually, stream's going down the next when were you available? Yeah, the next 20 months. Not going to be stream.
Yeah.
Oh, all my coaching sessions are full. Oh, Monka.
Yeah,
Saucy, where can people find you on the internet?
Yeah, I'm just Saucy Mailman on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube. I post a lot of YouTube stuff. I stream less often than FreshLobster, and I stream a lot more garbage as well, but we play some fun garbage. We've been playing a lot of Anivia Deep, War Mother's Control, Dreadway lately. It's been a lot of fun. But yeah, I'm just Saucy Mailman everywhere.
Awesome. Well, you can find me on Twitter at @the_Blevins, and you can find us in the show everywhere that you can find podcasts. Just search for Runeterrable or just search for Legends of Runeterra. I think we're the first one that comes up. And you can also go to Runeterrable.com. You can go to DeckPics.Live, and Discord.me/Runeterrable Radio is the best place to find all of our stuff. But again, shout outs and thanks to FreshLobster for coming on and providing. I think we can call this an LOR masterclass. At least parts of it were.
Oh yeah,
for sure. So hope you guys enjoyed it. Let us know what you thought in the Discord. But we will see you all later. Thanks again for listening and for watching. For Saucy Mailman, for FreshLobster, I'm the Blevins, and we'll be back next week to talk about more Legends of Runeterra.